Thanks so much for checking out my conversation with LIV Golf commentator Jerry Foltz. This is the Honest Something podcast, and I'm Bryan Fenley, a golf broadcaster. And in this conversation platform, we highlight the human sides of those who work in sports media. So all of this is to say this conversation has no boundaries. Before we get this underway, don't forget to subscribe. There's been a lot of content that you have seen that has already come out on this channel. A lot of good stuff as well that will be popping up in the future. So make sure you do that. All right, enough of this. Let's get to why you're here. My conversation with Jerry. He is a key face for the LIV Golf Tour as one of their premier broadcasters. Jerry Foltz, who not only is a good broadcaster, but he has one of the best man caves that I've ever seen in my life. He is a father, he was a pro golfer, and now he's dominating in golf broadcasting. We're going to share his story, get the professional side, but also the human side as well on the Honest Something podcast. I'm Bryan Fenley, a golf broadcaster. And Jerry, thanks so much for being a part of this. I really appreciate it.
No, I appreciate it, Bryan. Thanks for asking me. I'm not the most comfortable person talking about myself, but I'll do the best I can.
You do pretty good. I'm going to tell you that, because when you get to answer these questions, you're going to be like, you know what? Nobody knows the answers to these questions better than Jerry Foltz. And before we go into, what it's been like in terms of being a dad and all of that, I had to start with this because I recently had one of your colleagues, Sue-Ann, hang on. And
Yeah.
our conversation went for over an hour. And I don't assume it's going to go that long between you and I. But the very first thing she wanted me to tell you and to ask you is, what is it like working on that podcast with Sue-Ann Hang?
Oh my God, it is such a pain in the ass. I mean, Sue-Ann is such a pain in my side. I don't know why I volunteered for this duty, but some reason I got snuck into it, and I have to spend at least an hour every Tuesday night staring at her in the computer screen. And oh Jesus, I mean, it's just a slow march.
Do you ever get a chance to talk, like, when you're doing these podcasts for an hour with Sue-Ann? I feel like it would be almost impossible to get a word in.
That is how it all started. That's how the idea of a podcast started. Our bosses, when they're around us, now we have one of the really cool things about our live broadcast teams. It's the same team every week, and for some unknown reason, none of us really knew each other at all before it started, except I knew Faraday a little. Um, but we all really kind of like each other, and there's no real egos involved, and that's extremely rare in broadcasting. So Sue-Ann and I, she's just, I mean, I don't know if it's a compliment, but to me, saying it about her is she's one of the guys. She's just as cool as a human being can possibly get. And we give each other shit like brother and sister, although I'm old enough to be her dad. Um, we give each other incredible amounts of grief, and it's ruthless. And it's sometimes it's tough love. Usually it's just BS. And they loved the rapport that we had. It comes across a little bit on the air, not too much, but then they said, you guys got to do a podcast. And at first, our first few were kind of, like it felt a little bit like a talk show, like we were performing. And then finally they said, you guys just be you. That was the whole point of this. Just be you and give each other grief. And our last couple, we just did one last night with Dean Burmester. And it's endless grief. It's just us being us, which according to those who listen or watch a lot of podcasts, like my son does, said that's the whole point of it, Dad. That's the whole point of it. So we have a blast. She's as cool as it can as a person can possibly be, and it's kind of weird at this point in my career that I've made my best on-air friend, other than the woman I live with, Karen Stupples, my best on-air friend through Live.
It really is a beautiful chemistry that, as you talk about it and how everybody gets along off camera, it then shows itself on camera. You mentioned your son. How much credit are you giving him for going to Live?
Well, the story's not well known because who the hell cares about me, really? But I've told a lot of people the story. He, when I mean, I knew Keith Hirschland was involved, the producer, who's my best friend and the best producer alive that's ever produced golf. Hands down, that's not debatable in my mind. And if anybody wants to debate it, I'll take them on. Um, and I knew he was involved. And so, I mean, the idea was in the back of my mind, but there was so much bad PR out there about LIV. And of course, the institutional broadcasters and media had to either toe that line or believe that line. And so I knew it was not going to be perceived well if I was even, talking about it. But then I was sitting down one night after a few beers with Karen and, talking about the future. I've been at Golf Channel so long. At a point, how long do you want a 60-year-old man out there walking the fairways with all these young, talented female professional golfers? Sometime that optic's going to look bad, and there's going to be an uncomfortable conversation where, we're going to have to reassign you or, slow you down in your career. And I thought, I should call Keith, and we kind of agreed that at least hear what they have to say if they're interested. And I thought they might be, but I didn't know where they were right then. And so I called him, and next day he sends a nice email to his bosses and tells them how much he wants me on the team. I don't know why that's the case with Keith, but he seems very loyal and has a high opinion of me, which is crazy. And so talked about it, and I told them what it would take for me to go. They called me back the next day and said, okay. I'm like, well, what do you mean? He said, we talked to Greg. He's a big fan of your work. And he said, okay. I'm like, well, we're not even negotiating here. What? I mean, just okay. All right. Then it's like decision time. So I called my son up right away and I asked him about LIV. And he's like, yeah, I know all about it. He goes, Dad, the business model's genius. He said, it has the potential to be something that's going to be really, really huge and transform the game. He says, I'm excited about it. I'm excited about something else out there, another product in golf that might appeal to a different audience. He's 27 now. He was 25 when I had this call and working as an engineer up in Atlanta at the time for Bridgestone. I said, "What would you think if your dad was involved with it?" And he just lit up over the phone, like, "Are you kidding me? They want you to be, yeah, you'd be crazy." Blah 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 blah. And finally, when it came down to it, after I talked him through all the pros and cons from my perspective, he said, "Dad, you don't have that many years left. The brutal honesty of a child. You don't have that many years left. You don't want to spend them regretting not having the balls to take a chance for once in your life." And I'm like, "Done deal. I'm in." And it was a scary time, but it happened.
It happened, and it has been a beautiful relationship with you and all the LIV folks. Jerry Foltz is with me. I'm Bryan Fenley. How frustrating has it been, from the beginning here, where you've got people who are reading headlines and they're not actually studying up on what LIV is doing and where they're going and how they're trying to change the game and grow the game and be a progressive vehicle for the sport, where they're judging LIV on headlines, which is totally incorrect. And by what you guys have done, have debased what their thought processes are, but to still have to deal with that has to be frustrating from your standpoint.
Yeah, I think it was our first event where Graham McDowell termed it a smear campaign. And that's essentially what it was. And it was orchestrated, and there was a lot of influential institutions and people behind it that were around the monopoly that was the PGA Tour and golf. And there are a lot of stakeholders in that had to toe their line, whether they believed it or not, in order to keep their access and keep their livelihoods intact. There still are actually quite a few. So that part of it, I saw coming. The part of it that I underestimated coming was how easily people in the audience, the fans, the person, everything is supposed to be all about, how easily they bought into it and discounted what the product was at the time and what it could potentially be. A lot of eyes have opened since then, not all, but a whole hell of a lot, a large percentage of them. And it's come a long ways. But in that very first tournament, I've said this before, that very first tournament we had in London in 2022, Greg Norman, after the first day, and I made the mistake of looking on social media, and after everybody congratulating me once it was public that I took this job, I felt like I was going to my own funeral. All these people saying these great things about me. Then all of a sudden, many of the same people and a whole bunch of others said I'm the worst person alive for taking this job. And I said, you've been dealing with this for a while. How do you deal with it? He said, Jerry, just take the high road because there's not much traffic. And he has kind of pounded that home by example the entire time, everything we faced and every hurdle we've overcome, and we've overcome every single one of them that's been placed in our way. He has demonstrated that by his own work as well as, and it goes against my instinct. I want to fight. I want to call these people out. I want to educate them and very adamantly educate them and call them names. And but he's absolutely right. There's no winner in that. And why? I'm not going to change their mind through words. We're going to change their mind through actions and through success. And we've been doing that for 19, 20 months now.
Through actions and success and time. I bet
Yeah.
time has helped a lot to see how that
Yeah.
has helped. But then to say, how far along still do you feel like you all need to go to get more people to realize what LIV is all about? How far along are you and your team as far as that process, the improvements you've made, the progress, but what still is out there to go for?
You know, the opinions don't change quick. We've already seen, a massive 180 from Rory McIlroy, and we don't know what really is behind that unless he just basically started actually looking at everything objectively instead of through the eyes of Jay Monahan and the PGA Tour Policy Board. Um, we've seen a number of other players really, really soften their stance on it, and when you hear and see those comments, that tends to have I don't know, kind of an osmosis effect on the fans and on the rest of the media. And we've sensed that slowly, but it's never going to happen quickly. Nothing like, I mean, when you come in and you are as disruptive as LIV was, I don't think all of it was intentional, but a lot of it, this was always going to be disruptive, even if everybody played ball together from day one, which obviously they didn't. You're not going to change those opinions quickly. I think you just need to keep doing it by example. I think the international audience outside the U.S. has adopted it extremely quickly, extremely quickly. That first event in London, granted, we didn't charge a lot for tickets, if any, in some cases, but those people came out and they loved it, and that word spread. And everywhere we go, almost everywhere we go, the fans show up, and I have never heard from a single one saying I had a bad time at that event. That sells. That word gets out. The product on TV looked way different than your grandpa's golf tournament, way different than any broadcast I had ever been a part of in golf. But if you watch it for a little while, you realize, even if you are a hardcore, avid golf viewer of traditional golf, you realize you see a lot more golf. You see a lot more of the stars in the game, current stars that play at the highest level on LIV Golf in a broadcast than you'll ever see in a ordinary broadcast. And those opinions start to soften a little bit. The team thing is the hardest thing for the hardcore golf audience, the traditionalists, to really grasp. But for the non-golf audience, the people who've never really been exposed to golf, that's the first thing they're gravitating toward when they come to our events, or when they're watching on TV, or when we have interaction with them through digital means. So that therein lies, I think, the secret to the long-term success of the international and domestic growth of the game, is identifying with a team in a sport that's never had anything like that. And that's not going to be quick. The last sport that ever had a transformation like this, or a disruptor like this, was cricket years and years ago. And I think the IPL, or the idea behind the IPL, was started by a guy named Kerry Packer, who's a friend of Greg Norman's, a rich Australian guy. And his idea was, all right, cricket is really cool in the countries that play it, really loyal following, 4 and 5 day test matches. Nobody wins. That's the only form of cricket. Boring as all bejesus to me. But I still kind of appreciated cricket. He came up with the idea of, let's have a 1 day game. Let's get this over and done with in just 1 day. And all of the powers that be, all of the stakeholders, all of the institutions, all of the rule makers and governing bodies were just dead ass set against it. So in order to do it, they condensed the schedule. I don't know, it was 8, 12 weeks, maybe a little bit more. They paid the guys a boatload of money to come play and leave their club teams and their national teams to come do it. And all of them did, almost all of them did. Slowly but surely, they all matriculated over there. And lo and behold, 40 years later, 30 years, I guess it's almost 40 years now later, cricket is more popular than it's ever been. So much so that they decided 1 day was still too long. And now they have a 3-hour game called 2020. And it's actually fun to watch.
So is LIV. And you mentioned there are certain sports where there are more boisterous and vocal traditionalists than others. Some sports sort of really try to put the clamps down on a disruptor more than others. Why do you think golf has such a strong vocal set of people who are very conservative in the sense of they want to keep the game unchanged more than, say, another sport?
That's a good question. Maybe it's just a demographic of those who play golf compared to other sports. We have a lot of older people. You can play golf till you die, basically. You can't play other sports till you die. You It takes a fair bit of means to be able to be an avid golfer. Even at the most economical level, it takes a fair bit of means. So we have well-to-do people of usually of a socioeconomic environment where they they have maybe just a different value system than what we see in other sports. And old people like to talk about old stuff. And in golf, we have a lot of old people who like to talk about old stuff. You know, how many how many rules officials does it take to change a light bulb? 5, 1 to change it, and 4 to talk about how great the old one was. Now, no slot about rules officials. I meant that to be like an RNA or a USGA thing, but yeah, it's just the nature of, I think, the makeup of the people who love the game.
There, and you said it, Jerry, there is this love of nostalgia for certain people where, especially if you've played the game for years and say you're in your retirement phase of life and you hold on to those earlier memories, that anything that stands out and is different, you sort of resist. And being that way and knowing that there are other ways of looking at it, how do you feel like you can grab those people that are so stuck in their ways to get them to look outside the box and say, sure, nostalgia, that might be holding you back from looking at something and what we're doing at Live differently, but this ultimately is a good thing. And to get that set of people to be a part of it, what do you think that's going to take, understanding the challenges that are at play?
I don't know. I don't know what that would take. I don't know how important that is because that's a very small section of the potential audience for. I mean, we're trying to grow the game, not 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 grow loyalty amongst the people who are set against us. We're trying to grow the game to a new audience, to a bigger audience, and our demographic show to a much younger audience than traditional golf. So I don't know if it's necessary. It would be nice. I don't know if there are any steps you can take to help change their minds. We're not going to go to 72 hole stroke play with a cut in a massive field and boring ass Thursday and Friday coverage where you watch 1 or 2 groups. We're just not going to do it. That's not our product. And that gets rid. I mean, that takes away the appeal to the people who never watched that because it was boring, because it was slow, because it was uninteresting to watch. We have a broadcast style that is meant to get the viewer to lean forward, not lean back. I'm sure you've heard that from the others you've had on your podcast. And we have an atmosphere out there that tends to attract people who are going out there to have a great time and not reminisce about Ben Hogan's 1-iron on the 72nd hole at Marriott. So I don't know if it's necessary. It'd be nice. And I think if we just keep doing the same thing we were doing, and I think if they appreciate the highest quality golf they can possibly find anywhere on a week-to-week basis, only 42 days a year is what we play right now. I think they'll give it they might just click on every once in a while. And in time, they won't find it offensive. They might even surprise themselves and look forward to watching it next time because they do get to see more. They get to experience more. It kind of captures your attention a whole lot more than taking a nap.
Yes, well said. And as these broadcasts with Live are capturing our attention, you think about the way as an on-camera personality and narrating over the holes and the shot calling, and how much do you give as far as looking at it this way as a broadcaster come a Live telecast, that you know when the right time to inject humor and more so of your personality in the telecast, and then when you feel that it's best to be serious or straightforward?
Um, I don't know. I mean, obviously there's no objective way to define that. That's a feel, it's a touch, it's a, How do I teach somebody how hard to hit a 10-foot putt? You don't. You cannot teach touch, and I think that's the instinctive part of it. Experience certainly helps. Intellect certainly helps in that regard. Lack of ego really helps in that regard, and I think that's why we have such a cohesive team. Um, but I don't think you can teach that. I think that's just one of the things that makes some people good and some people okay and some people bad, is the timing of it. And if you're ever going to default, you always default on the conservative side. Now, if you default too often, then you have a boring ass broadcast and nobody wants to watch. So our bosses have encouraged us to have as much fun as we can. There are certain times where Sunday, last hour or two of the broadcast, this isn't joking around time. This is serious golf for a lot of serious things at stake, money wise, individual and teams. So you that you treat the tournament in the gravity that it deserves, but early times when there's people all over the golf course, the field is all spread out in terms of the leaderboard, and something comes up that you can have fun with, or your cameras capture something, you have fun with it, or a topic comes up that springs the thoughts to mind. Will Sager and James Watson have told us since day one, have fun, be yourselves and have fun. And those are two of the things that I think for a dynamic that you can't manufacture. You're probably not old enough to remember the Today Show when it was in its heyday with Katie Couric and Matt Lauer and their entire ensemble cast that was on that show. And they had a monopoly on chemistry. They had a monopoly on fun. And you tuned into that show and you felt like you were watching the morning show with 2 or 3 or 4 of your best friends. I think our very diverse and strangely our Brady bunch of broadcasters that came together to make the broadcast team for LIV, I think there's quite a bit of that because we all genuinely like each other. We all look forward to spending time together away from the course. I have never found that in 27 years when, sure, a few, you get your clicks and you have friends, but not the entire gang. Our entire gang really, really cares for each other and will get out of the way on the air and off the air, get out of the other person's way so they can shine whenever necessary.
And that idea too, Jerry, of when you have bosses that are instilling in you all to be yourself. Now, obviously, what we're always taught in broadcasting is you want to find your own voice. But depending upon if you're working for a certain institution, there can be a lot of legalese as to a regulation. Hey, we only want you to be like this. And you kind of have to be a cookie cutter. But to then be able to tap into yourself in a way that's free and loose, where you're able to be serious, where you're able to have fun. How has this tenure for you with LIV been and there's still so much looking forward, but been some of the more memorable moments over the course of your broadcasting career?
Well, if you don't enjoy your job, and I always had fun in my 27 years before this, I had a blast. I love my job. I love doing it. We had fun on the air. Now we just have more of it, a whole lot more of it. Some of the most memorable time. Well, I mean, Faraday calling me names on the air constantly, that never really gets old, no matter what. Arlo and I have this kind of love-hate relationship. And I just, I'm not a soccer fan. He is a big soccer guy, as you know, played himself on Ted Lasso. And I just don't get it. As any sport that can end 0-0 after 3 hours of screaming
Yes.
doesn't really do it for me. But then I am a baseball fan, so that's hard to justify that. So we have this kind of weird dynamic going on, but neither one of us takes offense to it ever. But I think collectively it has left more of an indelible impression on my memory bank and will as I fade off into the sunset someday than any individual circumstance. But it's it's just unique, and it's hard to describe to people. We are such different human beings from top to bottom. Every one of us are just we have so little in common other than golf. And Arlo didn't even have that before he started. My God, he did an incredible job. His very first ever golf broadcast, not knowing exactly how to broadcast golf, and he's only gotten better since. But we just have that. We're just, like I said, we're the Brady bunch of broadcasters, and we love each other. And it comes across that people genuinely can sense how much we care for each other, because you don't tease somebody if you don't like them, and we tease each
Yes.
other a shit ton.
What is your preparation for an event? And obviously, we're coming into the 2024 season, but if I am hanging out with the one and only Jerry Foltz, say a week before an event, getting ready for said event, what are you doing to prime yourself for the upcoming tournament?
Well, normally in my past 27-year life, you do a lot of homework because you could be covering anybody. We cover 48 people. We cover the same 48 people every time. So the X's and O's, pretty much everything. You might look up some stats. We have an editor, Mike Perky, who provides us this really, really in-depth research that you look through, you study through. Some of it doesn't register, a lot of it does. And you keep that in your mind for when it might be relevant in the back of your mind or on your notepad or what have you. I do a lot of perusing on the internet through social media and what have you to see what the guys have been up to lately that might make for interesting stories for the viewer that might make that person love the guy more or love to hate him more, whatever it may be. And those things, the human kind of personality and character of a person, the more you can draw that out through anything that or anything that you ask them. We do I think that makes a huge difference to the viewer. We do get to spend an inordinate amount of time around the players that you don't in other traditional golf because many times we're at the same hotel. We always have access to most of the places they can go at the course and the hotel. We're just part of the team, and our bosses view us as part of the team, and they want us to be part of the cast. I mean, those 48 stars should be way more famous than any of us, but they want us to feel like we're part of it, and they want the viewer to feel like you're just one big family. And it might be cliche, but it is one big happy family out there.
And that family will come together coming up here in a few weeks. But when you're traveling and you're going to these places internationally, what is that like traveling to these far off places where you guys are taking over internationally and you're going a long way away from being in Florida where you live now?
Yeah. How about Sue Ann? She travels from Singapore everywhere she goes. Dom travels from either London or Hong Kong everywhere he goes, and many of our crew do the same thing. There's some big trips. I flew back. We had our promotions event in Abu Dhabi, and I actually had a nonstop from Dubai, an hour away driving time, all the way to Orlando, where I live. And that flight coming back was almost 17 hours. And I had the easiest route back. Most of the other people coming to the States were going to spend from the time they left their hotel to the time they got home 30 plus hours. Those are some long flights. They're kind of fun though. I mean, they fly us nicely, so we don't, we're not sitting there getting too many leg cramps. But seeing some of the new cultures, I had never been to Thailand before. I had never been to Singapore before. I'd been to Australia. I'd been to England, but never the part of England we were in. I'd never been to Spain before last year. So that part's pretty. I obviously never been to Saudi Arabia. And if it weren't for Pharaoh laws, I would tell you how much I loved it there because I actually enjoyed the hell out of the experience and learning about it. Absent the no alcohol part, that's a little tough, but the rest was extremely enjoyable. A little warm as well. Um,
Yes.
but that part's pretty cool. That part is really cool. The fun part is once we get there, if it's a 2-week trip, like we go, I think this year we go to Australia and then Singapore, Australia, and Saudi Arabia or something. The best part is that second week because we're all traveling together, and then it just becomes a shit show. I mean, an absolute shit show.
When you're traveling and you're on these planes and you're, say, going on a plane and having to be on one for 17 hours, what is Jerry Foltz doing? Are you popping in a movie? Are you flipping through your laptop and going on the internet and studying up on the event? What are you doing? Are you sleeping the whole time? Are you eating the whole time?
You try and sleep, but it's not that easy. I like trying different foods. So, many of the times when you're flying to another country, either the flight, the airlines, or the crew, you always have the option for or one or two options for their cuisine. So I let the flight attendants pick for me, and I love trying new stuff, just flavors and trying new things. You don't have to eat it all, drink a few, and then try and find a movie I haven't watched before. And that's getting very, very difficult as I fly more and more.
What kind of movies do you like? When you're picking out a genre, what are you usually going to?
I default to that's weird. I don't know. That's so strange. I default to I'm the kind of romantic. I default to romantic rom-coms.
Why
I
did I
I
think
like
that was
action.
the case?
I default to action movies, but Karen and I were talking because Karen and I have completely different tastes. She likes superheroes. She likes sci-fi. She likes all these types of things that I literally cannot watch. And so we sometimes she watches a movie upstairs and I watch one down here in the man cave. But oftentimes we kind of make a compromise with each other. Um, but my I don't like dark movies, not in terms of the humor or the drama. I don't like movies that are filmed at night and indoors.
Just
I'm growing up out west in Nevada and playing golf my whole life. I like sunlight. So if there's a movie that's filmed primarily at day outside, I will watch it even if it's the worst movie on. Ishtar. Ishtar was absolutely terrible. That movie from 30 years ago. I loved it because it was all outside.
so interesting. The things we never knew that we would hear from Jerry Foltz, we are getting on this podcast. You mentioned Karen, you mentioned superhero. How is Karen your superhero?
I don't. She just she's an amazing human being. Obviously she's an accomplished golfer, being a major champion. She's really made a great name for herself in the broadcasting since she started. She's one of if not the absolute best on course, in my opinion, who's not with Liv. Um, but she gets me. She lets me be me, and she's always there for me when I need her. So you can't ask for more.
You can't ask for more. And as we wrap up this conversation, Jerry, being you certainly plays itself out in that man cave. I love how, and I'm sure you did this on purpose, the background, you have the cue ball on the billiards table in the perfect place. You have all
Oh
the
yeah.
other balls organized in the perfect setting. Obviously, this is a set design that you thought of, right? Before we started this conversation?
Well, no, because the rack was right up there on that mantle, and it was just looked like an eyesore. So I thought, where can I put the rack or hide it? So I just racked the balls. But I play that every day. I love shooting pool.
How
Um,
good are you at pool?
I would say if you a legitimate serious handicap be about an 8 or 10 compared for a golf handicap. I I don't lose a lot of money in the bars, so I do pretty good. Um, but you won't find a good golfer, a really good golfer, and not that I was ever really good, but I played professionally. You won't find a good golfer who can't shoot pool, and I don't know what that is. I don't know what. I think it gets back to what we were talking about earlier, teaching touch. You can't teach how
Mm.
hard to hit a cue ball, and you'll never find a great putter who can't shoot pool. So, and I also happen to have this is one of the oddest things about me that nobody ever knew, other than Mitch Lawrence and Ava Mataya, his wife. I also was a closet billiards fan, watching on ESPN when they used to when they used to show it, and especially women's billiards with Jeanette Lee, Allison Fisher, and Ava Mataya Lawrence. Now, her husband Mitch Lawrence is a friend of mine, and I used to love watching that. And you learn, and I don't know what it was about it, but I loved watching it.
You watch that, and then I'd be curious to know how much of darts you've watched because I see a
I
dartboard behind
suck.
you.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
how
My
much touch is involved in that?
I don't think it's much touch, nearly as much touch, because you don't have to control the distance it goes. You just have to get it there accurately. I suck at it. I mean, literally, my he's now 16, stepson, Karen's son Logan. He kicks my butt at it. He'd never thrown a dart before I got that dartboard, and he just kills me at it. Terrible
Well,
at it.
if he's not doing darts, he is certainly hitting the bullseye when it comes to Live Golf in their broadcasting world. And looking forward to this 2024 season. Jerry Foltz, I'm Bryan Fenley. Jerry, thanks so much, man. This was a really fun conversation.
Hey, my pleasure. Thanks. Hope I didn't bore you too much or your audience.